So a lot of these, now that I've like thought about them, a lot of them are duologies, I think, or trilogies. So we have shorter series here. That's not important. You don't care about that part. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with some series I wish I'd made some progress in. So when I was creating the last video you guys would have seen on this channel, which was books that I wish I had read this past year, I was realizing there was definitely some series in this list as well that I really, really wish that I had made some progress in. Maybe not finished completely, but at least some progress in. And I just didn't. So I thought we would talk about those today. Just some series that maybe you could count this as like top of my TBR for series or things like that. Just things that I really at some point during this year really wanted to make progress in because it was on a TBR, or I just was really excited about this book and it just didn't happen. So I usually leave a list of all the books I talk about down below with links if you'd like to check them out. For this one, I'll do just the first book of every single series I talk about because we have 10 here, and some of these are really short and some of these are really long, so it could just kind of get out of control. So if you want to know more about these series specifically, feel free to check those links out down below. But I have 10 here to talk about, so let's dive in. So the very first series that I want to talk about is the Inheritance Games series. So this is a trilogy that we have discovered, I think, is getting like a second part to it coming out next year. But the only book I haven't read in the series is the final one, which is the Final Gambit. This one, it came out, I believe it was in August of this year, but the last 3 years, each of these books have come out, and my husband and I have read them and really enjoyed the books themselves. I've talked about them many times on this channel, so I won't dive into them right now, but the third one came out this year and I really wanted to get to it this fall because the last two books I was able to read in the fall and it just didn't happen. So this series follows our main character Avery, and she is living with her sister and she is in high school and just trying to, you know, help make ends meet. And one day she discovers that the patriarch of the Hawthorne family has left her everything in his will, and so she inherits so much money and goes to live in his house and meets his 4 grandsons, and along with the rest of his family, but the 4 grandsons are the biggest part, and he was really into riddles and creating adventures, I guess you could say, for his grandsons. And so she teams up with a couple of these grandsons to try to figure out why her, and so it just spirals from there. The second one kind of had an ending, except for I feel like there was an epilogue that kind of created an extra level, so that's where the third one came from, and I just wish I'd made time for it because I've done so good about reading the last 2 that I was like, there's just one more, I can do it, and it didn't happen. The next one is the Malice duology, which is Malice and then the sequel, which came out this year, which is Misrule. So there's only 2 books, and I really wish I had made time for the second one. This book is a reimagining, a different look at the story of Sleeping Beauty from the Wicked Queen, the Maleficent character's point of view. So this duology follows our main character Alice. It's all from her perspective, and she's what's considered a dark grace. And graces are people in this kingdom who can help like give powers and like help with like good things, and a dark grace is supposed to be the person who is in charge of curses and spells, and people come to her when they want bad things. And so Alice meets our other main character, Princess Aurora. She is the last in a long line that has been cursed by a dark grace in the past, and basically she has to be kissed by her true love, I believe by her 18th birthday, and at this point it's of a year left. And so she meets up with Alice and basically asks Alice to help her find maybe another way to break the curse. And it is a romance between the 2 of them, which continues into the second one. I really enjoyed the first one, and I really wanted to get to the second one, and I just didn't make time for it. I love these UK covers as well over the US covers. It's only one more book, and then I'd be done with this duology, but I didn't make time for that one like I wanted. The next ridiculously long series is one that I talk about so much. I have like all of them, There are 4 at this point, and I've read the first one. And it is a companion series, and that is the Entangled with Fae series by Tessonia Odette. The first one was Curse of a Wolf King, and I read this one, I don't think it was last year, but I think it was the year before. I read it relatively recently, and I wanted to continue in order. They each follow a fairy tale, like a reimagining of fairy tale set with fae characters, and the next one is Heart of the Raven Prince, which is a Cinderella retelling, and then we have Kiss of the Selkie, which is Little Mermaid, and then of course A Taste of Poison, which is Snow White. And it's all a different take on that story, and I have had Heart of a Raven Prince on so many TBRs at this point. Like, it has become a little ridiculous, honestly, and I keep collecting these beautiful editions that the author herself has created the covers for and has signed, and like under the dust jackets are these beautiful hardcover books, and I just think they're stunning, and I keep collecting them because I think they're stunning, and I really enjoyed the first one, but I have not made time for the rest of these. So I really wanted to at least make one more, finish one more in the series, and it hasn't happened yet, and I can't tell you how many TBRs this book alone has been on. It's a little ridiculous, but yeah, so this is a series that I know I'm gonna love. It's new adult romances that are based on fairy tales, and I just haven't made time for it. The next one is the Curse Breaker series, which the first one being A Curse So Dark and Lonely. This one I have read. I've read the very first one in this series, but I have not continued with the next 2, which is A Vow So Bold and Deadly and A Heart So Fierce and Broken. This is a series that I read the first one for a vlog that I was doing, which was, I think, books that were hyped, and I was debating on whether or not they were going to work for me, and I really enjoyed it so much that I went out and immediately bought the next 2 and then didn't continue. And at this point, I've forgotten a lot of the first book, so I need to find a synopsis somewhere online. So this series is a Beauty and the Beast retelling of sorts. We follow our main character Harper, who has cerebral palsy, and she has been taken out of her world into this fantastical world called Emberfall, I believe is what it's called. Yes, Emberfall, and there's a Prince Brune, I believe is how you pronounce that, and he has been turned into this terrible monster, and he's got a curse on him and his castle and his land, and the only way to break this curse is if someone falls in love with him. And so it's that story, but there's way more to it, and then the next 2 follow on from the end of that one, and like I said, I've forgotten so much at this point. But I wish I had done at least one more book in this series this year. I'm okay if I didn't finish it, but I would have liked to have continued before I forgot everything. The next one is a manga series, and that is Stupid Love Comedy. This one is a bind-up, so there's 3 different volumes within this book, and I've read the very first one, and I really adored it. I thought it was so much fun. It is super bantery. The relationship between our main 2 characters is just really fun to read about, and so I really wanted to read this before the end of the year because I thought it was a manga. It was going to be really easy to squeeze in, and I just didn't make time for it. So this book follows our main character, Susie, who is an author. She's a manga author, and at the very beginning of the book, she's very lazy. She waits until the last minute to do things. She turns things in late. She's just not someone that you can rely on, and so her current editor says peace bye, and she gets a new editor who is this guy. Basically, like, she stumbles upon him on the phone talking about how terrible she is, and so they automatically start off on the wrong foot. And so it's the 2 of them trying to create this new manga, because not only does she get a new editor, she gets a totally new subject. I can't remember what it is, but like, she goes from one type of manga to a different type of manga as far as writing, and so he's trying to keep her accountable as she's trying to become better at what she does. And so they just have a really fun, ridiculous, bantery relationship. It reminds me of the first few volumes of Dreaming Sun, which I really adored that series, at least at the beginning. And so like, it gives me the same vibes, and so I'm hoping for the best, but I've only read the first volume. So I really wanted to get through the rest of it. I'm glad I have the bind up so I can have it all in one go, but yeah, I didn't make time for it, unfortunately. The next one is the Regency Vows series. So I've read the first 2 books in the series, and the third one, To Marry and to Meddle, came out this year, and I did not prioritize it. There are now have been more announced. For a while it was just going to be a trilogy, but there have been more in the series announced. I believe there's at least 2 more at this point that are going to be coming out, and I'm very excited about it. It basically follows this group of friends in Regency England and their respective romances, and there's a lot of difference. The first one is like a second chance of sorts, but it's like a married couple, so it's they're reigniting their love. And then we've got a hate to love, and then the most recent one is a marriage of convenience. And I love Martha Waters' writing style. She has a very humorous way of going about everything, and so I've really enjoyed the first 2 in this series, and I know I'm gonna love this one. I just haven't made time for it yet, and so I just really want to. I really want to, and it's just fun. They're just fun stories, and these covers are stunning. Like, I'm obsessed with these covers. So yeah. The next one is ironically the first in a series where I've read the rest of them, and that is the Wallflower series by Lisa Kleypas. So this is a companion series that follows 4 friends who are considered wallflowers, and so they become friends in the first book and proceed to find respective romances. I've read the second through the 4th book of these, but I haven't actually read the very first one, which is Secrets of a Summer Night. Now, I know they go in chronological order in the sense of, like, you read the second one, you know who she ends up with in the first one, but going into this one, you kind of already know who she's going to end up with anyway. But this one specifically follows Annabelle, who has no dowry. She's beautiful. Everyone wants her. She could pick her suitor if she wanted to, except for she doesn't have any money. And so there's a guy who's out very interested in her as a person, but wants to make her his mistress and not his wife, and she's like, yeah, no. And so it's their romance. I'm interested to see how the Wallflowers came to be, and if they were already friends before this book started, they became friends when this book started, because when I read the rest of the series, they were really, really good friends, and they all show up in each book, and they're so supportive of each other. I love them so much. So being able to see how it started would be very interesting. I would love to have read this one. I had it on my summer TBR because summer was in the title, but that did not work. But yeah, I would have loved to get to this one. So hopefully next year, because I really, really want to know what this one's about. The next one is the Dreaming Sun manga series. I was just talking about this one. It is 10 volumes long. I have all of them, and I only have 2 left that I haven't read yet. So this is a series that I adored when I first started reading it. I thought it was so, so good. And then about I think it was about volume 5 or 6, things started to spiral, and I have many questions. So we have 2 left. I'm so invested in these characters. I'm not going to give up on them, even though I've given the last like 4 volumes 3 stars. I only have 2 left. I'm going to do it. I just haven't made time for them, which, considering they're relatively short, I mean, the last one's the biggest one, and it's not that big. I just haven't made time for them. And like, maybe I'll be able to squeeze them in sometime throughout the next month, but I don't hold out hopes for that. So I had it in the back of my head to finish the series, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen. The first volume, I'll put it right here so you guys can see it. It follows our main character, Shamana, and she is living at home with her father, her stepmother, and their newborn child. And, well, newish. I think she's a toddler at this point. But she feels unloved. She feels like she's getting no attention since they had a child. And so she decided, I'm going to leave. So she runs away and meets this man in the park who basically is like, yep, I have a room to rent really, really cheap. There's a couple of guys from your high school who are living in this house. You can come stay with us. And so it's her moving into this house with 3 other guys, 2 from her high school, and then like this landlord character. And he's like significantly older than all of them. It's really found family in a sense, because it's the 4 of them and then their friends and their extended family. And so like it really becomes like this big group thing. But I love Shamana as a character. She is super naive and is a lot. She's a lot at times. But overall, she's a really fun character to read about. And you do have to kind of go in knowing it's going to be ridiculous, because she's a ridiculous character. She falls in love so easily and switches love so easily. But the last few volumes, just like the relationship that she's kind of in and out of, just didn't feel right for me. So I want to finish this series. Again, there's only 2 left. I can do it. I just haven't. The next one's the only one I don't actually own the book of, and that is the second in These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which is One Violent End. So this series is a reimagining kind of Romeo and Juliet story. It takes place in 1920s Shanghai, and I believe it's in this like fantastical element, because like if I remember correctly, there's a few fantastical elements that happen within this book, but it basically is these two rival gangs that are trying to control one territory. And so our main two characters are the son and daughter of the head of the gang. So we have Juliet and Roma, and they again are the kids of these heads, and they used to date at one point and then it ended badly, and throughout this book they are having to kind of come back together because a lot of gang members of both of their gangs are dying really suspiciously. And at first they're like, oh, it's the other gang, but the more they look into it, they realize that things are happening to both of their families, and so they started to investigate kind of what's going on. I remember it not being my favorite thing in the entire world, but I really enjoyed the world, and I loved the characters themselves, and it ended very dramatically. I do remember the ending very vividly. So the fact that there's only a duology, I really wanted to read the second one because there's a new book that this author has come out with that came out this year, and it's something about fortune. I can't remember what it's called. I can see the cover, but it is not related to the story in the sense of like you have to read this series, but it is like set in the same world. So it would be kind of cool to have finished this duology before I get that one. That one is actually out. It came out near the end of this year, but I pre-ordered a special fairy loot edition, so I don't have it yet, so I still have time to read this one. So I'm hoping to get to it soon so that I can have finished this duology before that one comes out and I can read it. But again, I did really enjoy this book. I'm just not sure I wanted to pick up the second one, so we'll probably get this one from the library or find an audiobook or something online. But I do want to continue because the story is fascinating to me. It is a little brutal because, again, gangs and war and stuff like that, but I just remember really enjoying it. So that's one that I really wanted to get done before the end of the year, and it just didn't happen. And the very last book, or series, I guess, that I want to talk about is the Guardians trilogy by Nora Roberts. So this trilogy I've had for so long because I accidentally bought the third book. A long time ago, like we were at a Barnes & Noble and they were doing that like buy two get a third free or something at one of the like paperback stations, and I bought this one because it sounded interesting and I didn't really think about it, and I realized it was the last in a trilogy. So I've been collecting it and I just never made time for it until this year. I read the first book, which is Stars of Fortune, and I want to say it was August/September, somewhere around there, and I devoured this book. I don't know what it was about her writing or the story or what it was, because a lot of things about this shouldn't have worked for me, but I adored it. So I want to continue with the second one, which is Bay of Sighs, and the third one, which is Island of Glass. They're not long books, and I do have all of the audiobooks on Audible, so I can get through this super easily. I just didn't make time for it, but I loved the first one so much. I want to dive into these two as soon as possible. I'm hoping to finish these two in the earlier part of next year because I loved it. I read this and I just got immediately sucked in. I couldn't stop reading. And this series, I should probably tell you what the series is about, follows 6 strangers that meet up in the very first book, and they are all searching for this star. A long time ago, I'm going to read it here because I always mess it up. A long time ago, there was a queen and 3 goddesses of the moon collected 3 stars, one of fire, one of ice, and one of water. But they fell from the sky and they've now like hidden themselves waiting for the right person to find them. So this series follows 6 strangers, like I said, who come together and are all searching for the stars for one reason or another, and each book follows a respective couple and their romance. Although it is an overarching story of them trying to find these 3 stars, each book does focus on a couple specifically, and each person who has come together in this group has some secrets and a very specific reason why they're searching for these stars. And so in the first book, you slowly uncover all of their secrets and why they're there and kind of who they are as people, and it is fascinating. It is fantasy, which is interesting because it's not written like a fantasy. It's written like a contemporary book with fantastical elements, but it's for sure a high fantasy. Maybe not high fantasy, but it's a pretty big fantasy there. And I just loved it. I just loved it so much. This is really my first step into a full-length Nora Roberts book. I have read, like, over the years, I've gotten those compilations where it's like a bunch of different stories written by a bunch of different historical romance authors all bound up, and so she's been in a couple of those. So I have read from her before, but I've never read a full-length novel, and I've never read anything on this caliber by her before. So the fact that this just blew me away, I don't know what I was expecting, but it blew me out of the water. So I really wanted to get to these two before the end of the year. I said that in a video a few months ago. I didn't actually think it was possible, which clearly, seeing as it's on this video, or in this video, it didn't happen, but I definitely want to get to these because I just loved the first one so much. It was just surprisingly good. And that's it. Those are all of the books that I wanted to talk about, or series that I wanted to talk about in today's video. I hope that you enjoyed. Let me know, as always, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, or if there is a series that you wish you had made some progress in within the past year, let me know that as well. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all that out, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!